something else when it comes to the CONCACAF region, gentlemen. And if you go to The Athletic, they have an article where they rank the top 20 players in the region. So let's have fun with lists. We know we love having fun with lists. And right away, out of the game, this is the thing. I don't know if it's a national bias. I don't know if we're going to try and sit here. Well, I'm going to say I do know we're going to try and sit here and be as objective as possible. But this is why lists are fun, because they have a ton of opinions that go along with them. So they ranked number 1 out of the United States of America, Christian Pulisic. So he comes in at number 1. Alphonso Davies is number 2. So Ollie, first things first, let's talk about the 1 and 2. Is there case for Pulisic over Davies a just one, or do you think it's an American bias? Worth noting, by the way, from what we have heard, there was a panel of 5 judges, 4 of them American, 1 Canadian, who came up with this list.
Yeah. I don't think there's a case. If anyone would like to make one to get us started here, you can feel free to jump in ahead of me. I don't think there is one personally. For me, if you put Alphonso Davies on the US men's national team and Christian Pulisic on the Canadian team, there is no way that anyone but Alphonso Davies would be number 1 on this list. So I do think that there is a little bit of American preference being given there. I think in the States that there has been a desire for a long time since Pulisic burst onto the scene with Borussia Dortmund to make this their world-class player, to say that he's the guy who's one of the top at his position in the world, and for him to be that kind of figure on the US men's national team. I don't think it has ever quite happened. That's not to say that he's not a really good player. He's a player who could absolutely be decisive in the coming week at the Nations League, has been in the past in this competition, obviously. I really like him as a player, and he's having a good season at AC Milan. I just don't think he's world-class, and I think Alphonso Davies is. And for me, there is no argument to be made when you're talking about the best player in this region, just straight up, no kind of, comparing positions or comparing, who you might start a team with or whatever the case may be in terms of other ways you can go at it. The best player in CONCACAF is Alphonso Davies, and I find it really hard to make a case for anyone else right now.
Wheels?
Same. By the way, if you're going to properly do a list covering all the teams in CONCACAF, maybe the panel should be representative of people all across CONCACAF. Where's the Mexican representation? Where's the Jamaican representation? Where's the Costa Rican representation? Because typically people that cover those respective national teams and follow their players play club football will have a better grasp of what their players are actually doing. So I think a 5-person panel isn't very many. So I would tend to recommend to print this off, if you have a printer at home, and just crunch it all up and throw it in the bin, because that's what it is. There's no doubt. Like I'll go a step further, Ollie. If Christian Pulisic played for Bayern Munich, would he see the field? I don't. Look, he's already flopped out at Chelsea. Look, Pulisic is a fine player. 9 goals and 8 assists. By the way, AC Milan are having a terrible season. They're 9th in Serie A right now. And Pulisic has oftentimes been the player that's kind of saved their bacon from even a more steeper drop. So, look, he's a fine player. But Oliver touched on it. Like, this whole push, and it's been happening for years, pushing Christian Pulisic to be something he isn't, I feel rather uncomfortable about it. I think the footballing world, in general, outside of America, feels very uncomfortable by it. It's fine to appropriately rate him. He's a very good player, but like Ollie said, he's not world class. He's got a documentary. What is it, like a Netflix series? Like the American commentators thinking he's the next Lionel Messi or the next Cristiano Ronaldo. He's not any of those things. It's so weird to me, especially considering this U.S. men's national team outside of this region haven't had a ton of success. They're on to another manager because of everything there. It's just, it's really interesting for me, this push to have a guy. When I look at this U.S. team, there's a number of very good players on it, but no true superstar. That's kind of the way that I look at things. So this list, I mean, it's more indicative of this push to make Pulisic something that he isn't, more than anything else.
Well, yeah, if I were to throw a bit of a curveball at you, would you say he's the best player on the American team even? Like, would you go so far as to say that, Ollie? Or so if you were to still rank just within the American team, is he their star? Would you look at other players as well and say, I actually think he's better?
He's obviously in the conversation. Again, if you're going to talk about a star, then maybe sometimes position comes into it. Pulisic is the one often scoring and creating goals.
That's always the
and
case.
So, that becomes the face of the team. If we're just talking about best player, I think Anthony Robinson absolutely has a case as one of the top left backs. It's certainly in the Premier League and maybe on a wider scale right now. But yeah, he's in that conversation for the US for sure. Like Will said, it's a team that I don't think really has that kind of standout player above everyone else. They have a lot of good players, and he's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Davies is one. I make the argument Jonathan David's the second best player. He was a much more important player on a Champions League side that went further than AC Milan in the competition. And if you're knocking Jonathan David down because he's playing for Lille has had a really good season. And they keep on selling off players to bigger clubs who look the real deal as well. And Jonathan David will then make his move in the summer. Is that what he needs to get the respect? He needs to move out of Lille? The way that they performed in the Champions League against the big dogs, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, they weren't playing like a bunch of soft, small club. Liverpool. David stepped up each and every time. That's what's just interesting to me. This isn't the AC Milan team that I grew up watching. This isn't a very good side. And they're one of the least competitive Milan sides that I've seen, over the course of the last 30 years. So I don't know. It's really interesting to me. Pulisic is the most important US player. I will say that, but is he the best? I love Tyler Adams. I think he's phenomenal. Anthony Robinson, he can work his way into bigger clubs in Fulham. There's no doubt about that. Weston McKennie, excellent, very important as well. You can name a number of different players, but Pulisic, based on this aura around him, this push to make him something even bigger than he is, which he is a good player, it just puts the spotlight solely on him.
Yeah, I caught some clips of that documentary, by the way, the love story.
You did?
Oh, nice. So warm and gushy.
You watched it?
Some clips. I didn't watch it. I'm just saying some clips. Oh my God. I feel like I'm being accused of something.
No, I was just, I was wondering who watched
Is it available in Canada? I might check it out.
I don't know. All right. So let's move on and let's actually look at the Canadians who were ranked. So Alphonso Davies coming in second. Jonathan David was voted number 3. The next Canadian on the list, Alistair Johnston. And then rounding it out, fourth at number 19 was Moise Bombito. So when you look at even just the ranking of Canadians, Davies, David, Johnston, Bombito, did they get that more or less correct, Wheels?
I don't know. Once you get beyond the top 5, you lose my attention. Oh, the 13th, I don't know. A player that I think will be much higher on this list, again, become a much more household name, will be Moise Bombito. I think he's excellent. I think he might be the most important player for Canada outside of Davies and David. And based upon his position, you take Bombito out of the equation for Canada, what are you left with? That would be a scary proposition. I just think he's incredibly important. I think sky's the limit. He's a player. What is he at? 19 on this list.
19.
I think heading into the World Cup, he's absolutely a top 10 player, probably pushing top 5 in this region. That's Ohio. I'm not sure if this is my own Canadian bias, and he does play center back, but I just think he has all the makings of being like a top center back. So I'm really excited to see where this goes. So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, and that's fine. But of all of these players on this list that I watch week in, week out, Bombito's the one I just get really excited about how high his ceiling actually is.
Yeah, if you go to Bombito at 19 and one by one go up the list until you find someone you would swap Bombito for, I think you can play that game for quite a while, to be honest with you. I would have him higher personally. I'd have Stefan Eustáquio on the list. Again, maybe that's our Canadian perspective coming across, but I think he's been consistently one of the most influential players in CONCACAF. You wouldn't know that the US has had a striker problem the last few years because they have 3 strikers in the top 20 who are apparently the top 20 players in CONCACAF. There's a few things you could pick out. I would even say Gio Reyna. To pick an American. Yeah. I know he's not having the best season. Form is temporary, class is permanent for me. I think he's one of the top 20 players in CONCACAF as well.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, this is the thing. When we were in our group chat, because we're friends, we talk outside of here, and this article was sent to us, and I happened to be in the vicinity of one Joshua Cloak, who was part of this voting panel. And I went up to him. I told him to explain himself. Here's the photo. I sent it. Like, look how miserable he is. Because
Did you tell him to stick? Did you tell him to stick to hockey?
No,
stick to hockey, Cloak.
I said, you better explain yourself, buddy. At which point he promptly defended himself and then followed it up with a tweet. And, basically said that the writers ranked this. He's like, spoiler, there's not enough Canadians on the list. I'd like to think we had something to do with that, by you guys sending that in the group chat and then me going and attacking him. That's how teamwork works. No, anyways, we love you, Josh. But he, in all fairness to him, he showed me his list, guys. He had Alphonso Davies first on his list. But he did have Pulisic second. And then
supposed
he
to give
did
him a
have
trophy
David
for
third.
that?
Yeah.
You're supposed to, what do you want? Like a clap? Way to go, Captain Obvious. Well done.
We're going to send him some pizza with no pineapple on it, even though that's what he loves. All right, guys. Canada's Nations League semifinal versus Mexico. Only 2 days away. You can watch both semifinals, by the way. Canada versus Mexico, USA versus Panama, right here on One Soccer. Pre-game coverage is going to begin at 6 p.m. ET. Yesterday, Canada Soccer announced that Richie Larea has been replaced by Zoran Basong. And Jesse Marsh, here's the other thing, guys. He spilled the tea on 7 of the starters versus Mexico. Probably the biggest takeaway in that is that Kyle Larin will start up top with Jonathan David, because there's always been some, talk about, that with Promise David coming on in. Are you surprised? First of all, I guess, Wheels, are you surprised that he was just willing to say, all right, these are the 7 guys that are starting for sure? So it's the 2 up front, it's Eustachio, and it's the back 4 that we always see. Are you surprised by that?
Yes, I'm surprised. I mean, it's difficult to say from our vantage point. This is when you don't travel to take part in training. Like, I don't know the context of why you would say that. It's nothing earth-shattering, I don't think. I made a video last week, and I named the 7 starters and promised David it's the other informed player. I don't think that this was any surprise, but for a manager just to come out and offer that up leading into to kickoff of an important match, that's a little bit surprising for me, because you want to have that little bit of element of surprise, like about what if you plant that seed in the manager's head. So look, Jesse Marsh loves the microphone. Like, how many interviews has he done in the build-up to? I mean, he is the spokesperson for the national team. And if this coaching thing doesn't work out, I'm sure that he's, another podcast is in his future. But yeah, that absolutely surprised me. Again, I'm not surprised by the selection. The candidness is welcomed by a lot of people. We'll see if this is the truth. Perhaps he puts that out there, might want to use some of these players in a different way. I don't know, because when I heard on their morning meeting that he came out and said this, I'm just, you're giving away your starting players already? It's a little bit bizarre to me. I don't know. Maybe I've just been around the game long enough, and managers are generally, keep things very tight to them. They don't want anything getting out, and just putting this out there already. I don't know.
How many times have we had to pull teeth from managers to be like, can you just secretly tell us the starting 11? We're broadcasting the game, for crying out loud.
We've had managers accuse people of leaking. Like what? Like, it just seems crazy. Like, there's a paranoia, just for our viewers and listeners to understand. Like, generally managers are paranoid about any sort of starting 11 being leaked. So that's why offering it up, it's at the very least newsworthy. Maybe not so much who's starting, but the fact that he's named the 7 starters. Maybe this is the new school approach.
Unless it's part of the trick, Molly. Unless it's part of the trick. We're here on my 7, and then maybe day of, it's like, whoops, didn't foresee that happening. So those 2 guys actually are not
David
starters.
Benched. Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is that, like, I don't know. I get what you guys are saying. Like, obviously, what we're used to is coaches who try and keep this under wraps, and some of them can be incredibly secretive and protective of their starting 11. But I've always kind of thought that's a bit ridiculous, to be honest with you, and particularly in a context like this where he's not named the 11, he's named 7 players that everyone knew were going to play. Like, I was surprised in the sense that it doesn't happen that often. You don't hear managers do this, but in terms of, like, if I actually think it's consequential, like, Javier Aguirre is going to have a game plan ready for Jonathan David and Kyle Larin up front. Whether or not he thought they were definitely going to start or not, he would have known that that was a very strong possibility. The back four, Stefan Eustáquio, I don't think anyone will be surprised whatsoever that those players are going to play. So I don't think it really has any actual impact. And, I kind of respect Jesse Marsh for just coming out and being honest.
I think you just said the exact same thing that I said.
Yeah, well, look at you guys are agreeing. Isn't that wonderful?
There we go.
There you go.
but here's the thing, and I think we've discussed this in the past, that because everyone keeps looking at Kyle Larin, especially with Promise David now representing Canada. But do you still look at this if this ends up standing as at least the 7 that will start as part of the 11 wheels? Do you look at this and say, listen, of course Kyle Larin is going to start. It's his position to lose, right? Like of course he's going to be a starter, right? Are you not surprised that he's that part of that 7?
None of it surprises me. This is a semifinal, and this team hasn't won a tournament since the year 2000. I'd hope that he wasn't using this first game at the very least to experiment. Go with what works for you. Larin, by the way, isn't a 90-minute player for Canada. I believe he's played 90 minutes once in his last 37 appearances for Canada. So that David or Jebison, probably both of them will feature, come off the bench and play, but Larin has the chemistry. I think that Larin's got a little bit of a bad rap, and I'm not actually 100% sure why.
True.
Him as a player on Mexico, he can't find the back of the net. For club, he scores, freely. His move from AC Milan has been a little bit stalled out of the gate, but Larin, when it comes for country, is very reliable, and he has chemistry playing alongside Jonathan David. I think they complement each other well, and he knows how Canada plays, and he knows what's expected of him. So, no, I'm not surprised by this whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, I was just going to add to that. He was the one where I think the other 6, I was 100% they're going to play. Larin, I was maybe 95%. I was pretty sure that it would have been a big risk, I think, to put Promise David in. But he is playing very well. He's scoring goals. He starts every week. I thought that was a tiny possibility as opposed to all the rest who I didn't think there was any possibility at all that they wouldn't start. So I think it's a vote of confidence in Kyle Larin as much as anything. When maybe you have a lot of supporters clamoring for the new guys to come in, Jesse Marsh makes a statement very early on here that Larin's the guy and he's going to start with Jonathan David.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also just stemmed from Copa America, right? They just wanted to see more goals, and the fact that he didn't provide it, suddenly it's he's become a little bit of the, I think whipping boy might be a little too harsh, but he's the guy that some fans want to see more, that position, want to see more experimenting with. But to your point, why, right? He's done so much for country. He shows up. He's gotten it done before. And that doesn't mean he won't be subbed out and someone else goes in and, you have depth at that position. But yeah, it does seem a little weird. And I feel like it really started to become vocalized after Copa America. Who else would you have in Canada starting 11, Ollie?
Well, I'd have those 7, obviously, as we've established. And then I think there's, I don't think Dane Sinclair in goal is going to be that much up for debate. I just think he's had a much more stable start to the season. So I'd be surprised if Max Crepeau comes back in after Sinclair took the quarterfinals of this competition. Then you get into the real decisions for me. I've gone with Ahmed and Buchanan on the wings, with Ahmed switching to the left. Obviously, Jacob Schaffelberg is in that mix, but he's played 15 minutes this season. So I think he's more likely to come off the bench. And then for this pretty much the same reason, I've gone for Ismail Kone in central midfield over Matthew Chouanier, who just got his first 90 minutes after injury in at the weekends. Kone's just been playing, although not starting every week, he's been playing more regularly, obviously, in Ligue 1 since joining Rennes. So that, I think, I'd be surprised if there's changes to that. Schaffelberg and Chouanier will be in contention. I don't really see anyone else beyond that being in the mix for the 11.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you're right about Schaffelberg not really playing a lot.
Hasn't played at all. He hasn't played at all. I mean,
people love him.
I know.
Yeah.
You might love him, but if he hasn't been playing, you can love him, but he's not going to be match fit. Your love for him is not going to give him the legs and put him in a position to be able to play significant minutes over these 2 games.
It's an interesting question. Could the country's love power Jacob Schaffelberg despite his lack of minutes?
Is he a Care Bear? Because I don't think he's a Care Bear. So I don't look. Schaffenberg's one of those. I think it's just because he's part of the team going forward. And I've said this, like Marsh didn't necessarily pick the best team in terms of players that are ready to be contributors right now. I think that there's a balancing act ahead of 2026. And guess what? Like all this conversation about pressure being on Jesse Marsh, pressure's on Mexico. Okay. Like they're the ones who have like this crazy fan base and massive expectations. One of the host countries who's been underperforming. All the pressure's on Mexico. I can hear the spin already, the way that would work if Canada loses and gets knocked out by Mexico. Oh, it's all about 2026. Look at our players. Some of them just aren't in the right, it will quickly change to that. When I look at that starting 11, like I don't think Oliver was splitting the atom there. I think it kind of picks itself. But two specific names on that 11 are really important players, and I think that it can be considered outsiders in terms of reliable players right now for Canada. Let's start with Tajon Buchanan, like top player. We all remember how good he was in World Cup qualifying. When was the last time Tajon Buchanan had a goal or an assist for Canada? It was at the World Cup. Buchanan to Davies against Croatia. That was the last time. He hasn't really been a big part of Jesse Marsh's plans because he wasn't playing well at first, and then he got hurt. And so this is like a brand new player coming in. If he is Buchanan, like we know Buchanan can play, difference maker. I think the entire complexion of the way we look at Canada is different. Same thing goes for Ismail Kone. Had a miserable start to the season at Marseille. He was frozen out. Now he's at a position where Jesse Marsh says that he's just starting to look like his old self again. That doesn't mean he looks like his old self or he's an even better version. He's just getting back there. He's only started 2 out of the last 6 games with Rennes since he's joined there. If he is Ismail Kone like we all think he can be, again, another difference maker in the middle of the park. But I still think that you can tag a little bit of a question mark right next to both of their names. Form matters. What they're doing right now matters. It doesn't, your reputation or how much we like someone, that doesn't really come into play here. Are they ready to go? Are they ready to win right now? It is going to be a tight, cagey, physical game against Mexico. That is their game plan. That is what they're going to try to do. Disrupt, frustrate, and really get in the face of this Canadian side. Are these players ready to step up to that challenge? The hope for all Canadians is that answer is yes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. First of all, I just wanted to make the point about Jacob Schaffelberg because the amount of casual soccer fans who mention his name as a reason why they're excited to watch the team has actually blown me away. But on the note of some of the players Wheels has mentioned there, Ollie, who do you think has a potential to make a big impact outside of that 7? If we're also taking a guess at who else can come into that lineup.
Yeah, I'll go off the board a little bit with this one because I'm not talking about a player who's going to start. He may not even play. But I think there's been a lot of talk about, obviously, the strikers coming in Promise David and Daniel Jefferson. And perhaps Jesse Marsh sees what he sees in training this week and likes the look of one or both of them. And this guy's opportunities are going to be limited as a result. I still think, however, that Taniolo O'Shea has a part to play for this team. I think there is a reason that in a very deep pool of strikers, when you look at Theo Bair, Jason Russell-Rowe, all the guys who have been left at home, there's a reason he's there for me. I think he's a player who's consistently made an impact off the bench for Canada and is a real weapon as a substitute. So as much as there is excitement around the new guys, and rightly so, I still think he has a part to play, and I would not be surprised to see him at all at some point in these games.